From the first steps of blacks forced onto this land in 1619 to the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, to the founding of the African Episcopal Church of St. Thomas in Philadelphia, to the ordination of the first black priest in the Episcopal Church, blacks in America have continued to push their way towards freedom in mind, body, and spirit. The Episcopal Church at this time was truly slow to move towards desegregation, yet these barriers would not stop the spiritual conviction for religious freedom of black people. The Reverend George F. Bragg wrote, "They wanted to rise. They had ambition to be everything that other people were. They may have been wrong, but from their point of view, none but their own leaders could guide them to the haven where they would be." As blacks in America sought religious freedom, leaders such as the Reverend Cassius M.C. Mason would work to continue to build the foundation of freedom in St. Louis, Missouri. Reverend Mason was born in 1844 in Baltimore, Maryland. Mason was one of a very large family, all of whom were christened at St. James Episcopal Church under the Reverend William Levington. Through years of training, Reverend Mason was elected a member of the vestry of St. James before he had attained his majority. He also served in every position open to a layman in the church. After the debate of the role of young people in the church in 1867, he, along with other young people, took to establishing a new congregation in the newer section of town, which would become St. Mary the Virgin, originally named St. Philip's. Having achieved such accomplishments in the church, Reverend Mason was called to go west. The Reverend James E. Thompson, the first black priest ordained in the state of Missouri, having left St. Louis, wrote to Baltimore and influenced Reverend Mason to move to St. Louis, which he did in 1878. After relocating to St. Louis, Reverend Mason succeeded Reverend Thompson at Mission of the Good Samaritan as administrator and teacher. Reverend Mason was ordained as priest in 1883 and was elected rector of All Saints Parish, which was formed from the mission. He served as the senior priest of the diocese, ranking next to Bishop Daniel S. Tuttle, and served as rector of All Saints until his death in 1917. Reverend Mason was active in working towards the betterment of the black people. In an interview with a Globe Democrat newspaper in 1896, Reverend Mason candidly discusses the conditions of blacks associated with the crime rate in St. Louis. He points out the many ways that blacks are disproportionately charged with crimes in the St. Louis area, and the need for the improved moral status of blacks through work, education, and living equity. On a national level, he served as secretary for the Conference of Church Workers Among Colored People, a largely black organization. The CCWACP was originally organized by John Peterson and the Reverend Dr. Alexander Crummell at the Convention of Colored Clergy in 1882, which included clergy and lay persons who sought to fully integrate black Episcopalians into the life of the church. It also strove to improve social conditions for blacks in American society. Through his life work, Reverend Mason was a revered and respected person. On the day of Reverend Mason's death, March 21st, 1917, Bishop Tuttle wrote the following in his diary. In the early morning of this day, Reverend C.M.C. Mason, Rector of All Saints, St. Louis, died of pneumonia after a short illness. A godly man, a devoted pastor, a builder up of his parish into a strong, self-supported parish of 500 communicants, the senior priest of the diocese, the only one left who had been in the steady service with me for the whole 30 years of my Missouri life. He was a wise counselor for me and with me. I shall sorely miss him. God be thanked for his faithful life and abounding good work.
One of the most basic African beliefs is that I means we. We are meant to be part of a community. If one is not safe, no one is safe. If life is not fair or balanced, tragedy will fall on all our houses. It is with this understanding of community, this kind of spirit, this kind of love, that I live my life. As a woman, as a Black woman, and as a priest. I'm often asked what my work is, what my calling is. Well, they're inseparable. I've been called to serve God and God's people, yes. But I've also been called to go tell it on the mountain. I've been called to not only seek to change minds, but to change hearts. I have been called to remember, to honor, and to call on the ancestors. When there's no place for me at the table, I've been called to bring my own table. Because sometimes there won't be a place for me unless I make my own place. Sometimes I've been called to make the comfortable uncomfortable. Sometimes I've been called to turn over tables. And sometimes I've been called to gather people together so we can gather at the wall. Sometimes I've been called to try to make a way out of no way. Sometimes I'm called to remember. Sometimes I'm called to resist. But always, always, I'm called to persevere, to persevere, to persevere. The question is not only what have I been called to do, but what have we been called to do together? In the words of James Baldwin, the challenge is in the moment. The time is always now.